do as a player, what you can do as a coach. Can you control whether you win or not? How many people here have won every match in their lives? How many people would like to have won every match in their lives? I would. If you think you would like to win every match and you can't, then it should start sinking in that winning is not in our control. Secondly, we think if we can play well. How many people here have played well every single time they've gone on that? None of us. Well, okay, one of us. Oh, and she's lying over there. Roz, is it Roz? Is that right? Okay, take the trophy away. Well, the trophy's already gotten away from her. So, if we would play well. We can't control that. The three things you can control is your attitude on the court, even when things aren't going well, your effort, and your sportsmanship. How do you treat others? Attitude, effort, sportsmanship. All sportsmanship summed up in one, if you remember nothing else from this talk, all sportsmanship can be summed up in one sentence. Anybody want to take a stab at it? It starts with the word treat.
Other people.
The way you want to be treated. Think about that. Every single sportsmanship situation can be summed up in treat others the way you want to be treated. So, we don't see it all the time. I want to tell you about the coach and the other coach. Sectional tournaments, sectional finals. Two of the top teams, top two boys teams in the state a few years ago. Now, every kid dreams of going to the state tournament. It's something they can hang their hat on later. We went to state. But here we are with two of the best teams in the state in the same section, which means only one gets to go. The other one gets to say, well, no, I'm going to explain why I didn't go to state, but we really played against one of the other better teams in the state. So I went to watch the match, and there were two teams full of tennis and life camp kids that we talked about sportsmanship with ad nauseum. 2/3 of the kids on both teams were there, were TLC campers. And so I was interested and concerned to see how this is going to work out. All 7 matches went to 3 sets. 3 of the matches went to third set tiebreakers. And this is what I saw on the court. This is where the rubber hits the road. You're talking about the most pressurized situation for kids. And I know that when I was a kid, I would sometimes bang my racket. I would sometimes swear. I've spent my life making amends for that. All of these matches, I saw these TLC kids reaching out, and when their doubles partner made a mistake, they went over and high-fived them and gave them encouragement instead of turning away in disgust. I saw them clapping for their opponents when they hit a good shot. And guess what? In one of the most crucial matches, in the third set, in the tiebreaker, I saw one of these kids hit a shot out. And he needed this point. And his opponent didn't see it and called it good. And the kid said, my shot was out. And the kid lost the match. And after this was all over, I went up to the one coach who had lost and I said, I am so sorry, I'm sure you're discouraged and disappointed, but I gotta tell you, I could not believe the sportsmanship your kid showed. And he said, sportsmanship means nothing if you don't win. He said, my kids have no guts. And then he said, and I'm like, okay, this is a guy who sent a lot of campers to us. And I go, I know you're disappointed, but, and then he said, and they have no heart. And they're a bunch of, and he kept going, they're a bunch of type B personalities. So when the rubber hits road and the game is on the line, they say whatever. And I'm thinking, well, they can't just crumble because they're the second best team in the state. So you're missing something here. I didn't actually say that, I was thinking this. And I walked away so discouraged from that. And I went to one of the parents and I said, tell me about this coach. And the parent said to me, we spend all our time as parents trying to keep our kids' spirits up. Because he does this all the time. Let me tell you about the other coach. I went to one of the parents of that coach. This was the #1 team in the state at the time. And she said, this coach, she didn't talk about the winning. She said, this coach, at the beginning of every season, sits us all down as parents and kids and says, if your child wants to play for me, they will be a good sport. And if they're not a good sport, they won't play. They could be the #1 player in the state, I won't play them. And you say, oh, come on, you cannot win with that model. This was the #1 team in the state, folks. It's your choice. Every time we step out there, what do you want your legacy to be? And so, let me tell you about someone who is perhaps the best coach I've ever met with all of these things. Carl Wolf, 8th grader. He came to tennis and live camps, loved what we were doing with the sports museum. He did not have a tennis team to play on. He's from Aiken. They did not have a boys team. He went back home and talked to the school board saying, we've got to have a tennis team here, a boys tennis team. And his attitude was, we can do this. He's an 8th grader presenting this to the school board. The school board said, you know what? You need to show us that there's some interest first. And so he said, okay. Then you talk about the effort. He went out, found all of his friends, said, we're going to have a tennis team, but they want a club team first to show interest. So they all gathered, got the club team. They got these athletes in the spring that weren't playing a spring sport and got them to play. And then they went out and got kids who'd never picked up a racket before. And they said, we don't know how to play. And Carl said, that's all right, I'll teach you. He went back to the school board and said, we got our club tennis. We want a boys tennis team. And the school board was flabbergasted and said, we didn't know you were going to actually do that. And said, sorry, but we don't have money for a coach. Carl said, that's okay, my dad will coach for free. And Joe Waltz left his day job to work nights so that he could coach that team. And his mother, Cindy, began to coach the girls' team to do the same thing, and they did it volunteer. And what Bob was talking about right here, they did it out of the goodness of their hearts because they saw the lives that were changed. And sportsmanship, he modeled that. Playing against the kids from Duluth, he went into a 3-hour, 3-set match, and the entire match, he and his opponent were clapping for each other more than the fans were clapping for them. And when the match was over, they threw their rackets down. They were so exhausted, went up to the net, and Carl, who had lost the match, said, that was the most fun I have ever had playing tennis. And the two of them became best buddies, and in the summers played USTA tournaments together as doubles partners. Isn't that beautiful? And isn't it wonderful how life turns out just the way you plan, except the next year is senior year after all this stuff. He was the #1 seed in the subsectionals, and right before subsectionals, he died in a car accident. Imagine the grief. And what was his legacy? He was the best coach I've ever met. His parents